Thank you, Matt. When you and I planned this presentation, we decided to ask, what is the one thing you hope to have learned and have a better understanding of? And here's the voice of customer. We're going to examine 3 powerful tools that provide insight into the economics of inkjet and crossover points in evaluating one press versus another and more, especially offset cost analysis, because almost all your questions indicate you live in an offset world for book manufacturing. The big thing we're going to see is how these tools work together. Hello, colleagues in the graphic arts. My name is Paul Dombrowski, and I'm an ROI analyst for printing presses. 5, 30, 90, as in million pages per month, as in duty cycle for your target digital press. While the focus is inkjet, the tools and processes we're examining can be applied to any printing press. To provide a stake in the ground for our work today, we'll assume your business strategy is offset transfer. Your strategy could be all new work or some combination, and typically we adjust our analysis based upon your business strategy for your future press. Duty cycle is a big part of your decision. Park this image in your mind's eye as we examine the tools. Starting with your offset presses, a move to digital will have a mix of work between covers, tabs, blocks. Understand the correlation to fit the right press and presses to maximize your opportunity and minimize your investment. And by the way, I am press agnostic. I don't sell presses. My work together with press buyers and sellers focuses on the ROI part of the conversation. I help you to show your press manufacturer the key insight about your press load and how this might transfer to digital. I love this graphic from Key Point Intelligence. It's instructive because it gives us a high-level analysis of the digital offset crossover point. Consider when you're looking at this that you've tested your work in the target digital press, and what it produces is at the quality level on the type of paper required and within a time frame and cost that's acceptable to your publisher customer. You've got to be happy at that point to move to the parts of the analysis that we're going to look at. The input for this study is drawn from a variety of end users of offset B1 presses, offset web presses, and digital high-speed roll-fed color inkjet presses. It relied primarily upon phone interviews about usage of the presses and costs. The target job is a 12:9 flat finished to 6:9 with a 300-page count. Half of the pages are monochrome, half are color. Finishing excluded. What's important when viewing this information is this. This graphic is instructive because it tells us digital has a clear advantage at run lengths. However, this is about your business. You must establish your own crossover point based upon your workload and your future presses. So let's start to do this. I have sample data sanitized from my archive. I've done the analysis at the approximate quantity breaks. My focus is on offset full web producing color books to folded signatures. We're going to look closely at the running cost model that was used to generate these figures. And we're going to make an assumption about the inkjet cost per page, 0.008. We can begin to see a crossover point around 825,000 pages. So you have questions for me, I know that. It might sound something like this. Paul, where are your proofs? Well, I can answer this question. Actually, you have everything you need to answer this question. Who gets excited to see a refrigerator organized like this? Marie Kondo, also known as KonMari, is a Japanese organizing consultant and author. She's written 4 books on organizing. And yes, your data and high-level cost information can be organized like this, so that you can see into every one of your offset jobs and determine the cost per page. Establishing your cost per page for every offset job is the key to gaining insight into your crossover point. It'll probably look something like what we see in the key point intelligence graphic, but it'll be so much better because you'll have the confidence that the numbers represent your costs and volumes and more. Think about this. Once you can segment all your offset work that is above the cost of digital, then you can drill in deeper and see the paper, binding styles, customers, book types. So let's see how this all comes together for you. Let's start with the basics. Here are the key ingredients for an offset cost analysis. Keep in mind, my story does have just a bit of know-how or how-to. However, I'm not wading into the weeds. We'll stay at high level so you can appreciate why offset cost analysis and TCO instruments and net present value models are tools that you'll grow to love and put to work. At the heart of every crossover analysis is the common page unit. It looks like this. It gets many names, that common page. A4, letter size. My own nomenclature refers to letter equivalent page. Regardless of what refinement of the definition, we want to understand this term and be on the same page with our definitions. There are no stupid questions, only simple questions that we fail to ask. Count and time, this is powerful. It's probably sitting right there in your data. Count and time are key measures for everything that has a cost. And when I say high-level offset costs, here's where I'm headed. Assume we have 1 year of your production data from your offset presses. Then look up these costs for the same period. Literally, go into your records and tell me what you spent for each year, for each line item. Databases have a way of calling the same thing by several names, but there's a bit of mapping exercise for this part of the work. It's so worth it. These are, I would say, essential elements in your database. So they'll have different names. Basically, those are the elements. Running cost model. This is the big one, the running cost model. When comparing presses, this is the one I use, side by side with Inkjet. This allows for an apples to apples comparison. For example, I put make-ready paper into the offset part of the running cost model. We know this is a key difference between offset and Inkjet, so let's measure it. Regardless, if you use this exact running cost model, here's what's important. Specify a model up front. It'll save you a ton of confusion. Here's where things start to come together. These calculations are inserted into each row of your job data. For example, for plates in chemistry, we have the total for the year and what your plate costs are. We divide by the plate used for the job and get the cost per plate. We can adjust the figures for plates that are rehung. This same logic is applied to each cost item to allocate costs across the job. Here I pulled one job. Costs are allocated and divided by CPU, or letter equivalent pages. Now, I love that cost information that's starting to emerge. Next, we have to compare it to the Inkjet press. We don't have data and cost information unless you already own a digital press to compare. The TCO instrument for Inkjet typically has inputs, calculations under the hood, and results. These instruments can be intimidating. However, they are essential to providing your cost per page for the Inkjet side of the equation. Not to oversimplify this, However, the key data we want to know from the TCO instrument for Inkjet is how many pages will run through the press and the cost per page. What about ink? I don't know if your future is black and white pages or color, but let's anticipate color for our discussion. Ink is powerful. It adds a ton of value and is priced as such. The key to buying and selling ink profitably is to know what is being consumed. Here's an ink estimate for 8 books up on the left side, right there. It's the average milliliters of CMYK per page. Look at the difference. So you must put into place a system and process to control ink usage. And by this, I mean estimate, reconcile, and invoice. A busy 90 million page a month press will consume $1 million to $2 million of ink a year, depending on the Inkjet module in the press. I've done a lot of work in this area, and you can get useful insight into controlling your profitability with my ink control guide. If you just text me your name and email address, I'll send you one. It's the most cautious way that I know to address this subject. I want you to feel like ink is a casual element in your Inkjet world. It's going to require new lessons, new processes, a clear understanding as how it impacts your profitability for the job. So now the numbers are coming together. We can see the offset cost for a specific job and the Inkjet cost. And in this example, there's a cost reduction with Inkjet. Offset, Inkjet, cost reduction. Visualize this mechanic happening for every one of your jobs. We're pulling out of every one of your offset jobs this exact information. So here is a little bit under the hood, but what I'm doing here is inserting into our analysis one powerful calculation. And this is to calculate the offset cost per letter equivalent page. You're there. You have the power to gain trusted cost insight for each of your jobs. When you apply those calculations across a basket of work, in this instance, I have gone into all offset costs per page that are greater than 0.008, and here's how it looks. This is a plot. Guess those jobs at the top are bad days on press, outliers, but that is where your offset costs line up at above 8 cents per page. Each one of those dots, by the way, represents a record in your offset data. You could click on that dot and it would show you exactly what you're reporting out of your data. Here's a crosstab for the data. The bottom row has grand totals for each column. Right there. Visualize, this goes way up. I have actually in the back of this in the proofs the number of jobs that are in this basket. The interesting number here is actually, we've been working towards this part of your analysis all along, but you can see at the Inkjet cost, the number of pages, and the total cost per book order. You summarize this, not quite the end point, but this is definitely a milestone in the analysis. Now we're showing the offset costs for that basket of work 5.4 million. Inkjet, making an assumption, and I have deference to the inkjet manufacturers in this discussion. I'm arbitrarily pulling a 0.008 out of it. It will be different for you. And that shows your cost reduction opportunity. I put a star on pages to inkjet a year because there's a judgment to make about what jobs to transfer. And we'll look at that in a minute. There's another look on that same basket of work, the run length distribution and the correlating offset cost per job. Keep in mind that each one of these bars represents one job. This is a compressed view, so it looks solid blue. So under the hood of what we've done so far, we have the proofs, the assumptions and calculations. The software that I use pulls out any assumption we made, any of those graphs, it's reported right here. And it's fluid. You can change, you can go into a deeper range of offset work. You can change your inkjet cost per page. We can plug in a different figure for inkjet cost per page, for example, and run the scenario on that. But here's where it gets really interesting from an analysis standpoint, and where you'll have your own questions to drive the analysis. You might ask, okay, let's look at the 6x9 work or the 11-inch work. At this point, you know your job and customer profiles better than I ever will, and the data is going to start talking to you. For example, you can look at your fleet of presses. This is a sanitized look in on a fleet of offset presses, and what it shows is the volume of work on the press, represented by the yellow bar, and the volume of work that could be produced at a lower cost using inkjet. Your presses will look different, but maybe not that different. So the big number, the number that requires the most work to extract, we've just done that. It's the cost reduction opportunity. Typically, you can produce your own NPV model, but now it's possible if you've got a trusted figure for that cost reduction opportunity. At the tab and at the top, it's probably a little small, but this is the model that I'm using. It's capital cost recovery depreciation, the cost reduction opportunity, capital contribution overhead and profit, annual contribution overhead and profit, and the summary of the cash flows. This is a look at the cash flow. This is a sheet, and I say it's a little bit tiny here. I hope that you can see most of it, but it's important. You can look at this example, and I plugged in just 1/2 of the offset pages that are at a higher cost than inkjet. So I've made a judgment that we can't move all those pages. Again, arbitrary, just for showing you this. And I plug in that cost reduction figure. Capital cost recovery, it can probably be had in year one. Your CFO decides the key contribution I'm making to this model is the cost reduction. Additional work, again, another cash flow that we want to measure. I'm putting in my assumptions just to fill out the model. So here we are, about to touch down from this 3,000-foot view of 3 powerful tools to help answer your questions. And by the way, why should you listen to me on this subject? Well, here are a few reasons. Aside from the part about how much I love this work and the time I've invested to perfect the process, it still brings us back to you, your questions. And I'm thinking that at this point, you might have a little better appreciation for how these tools can be put to work to look at the first question, for example, or the first query. What will it take to justify inkjet into our operation? And I've got dots all across that row. I'm going to make an assumption your operation is offset presses, but it could be any press. will follow the same method that we've outlined in our views, our data views, and our calculations. But that offset cost analysis is the key work to establish your current state. Your Inkjet total cost of ownership instrument, that's your key tool to put a stake in the ground for what the future state would look like based upon your offset basket of work. And think about how much of I'll call it a more enlightened conversation you can have with your inkjet manufacturer when you get to the question on that TCO. So how many pages do you have? Well, boom, here's what you have. When you have that, I'll call it that hard data analysis in your hands, now you're not just swagging it. And you can really take that conversation to another level. You can say, well, based on your inkjet cost per page of, say it is 0.008, we have this many pages. And when we look in those pages, here are the papers we have. And when those jobs, here are the sizes. Here's the finishing requirements. Here's the customers. Here's the priority customers to move, or the priority products to move. Think about that. Bring the finishing guy into the picture, the finishing expertise into the conversation. Prioritize your work on day one based upon what you see in your job basket, based upon the equipment that you're targeting. Next row, better understanding of economics of offset versus inkjet. Both have fabulous production capabilities. Obviously, you've had probably made a lot of customers happy with your offset presses. But we know, and we can look back earlier on the key point intelligence, that there is a more efficient tool to take some of those low or those shorter runs off of the offset and move it to inkjet. When we say better understanding of economics of offset versus inkjet, I think you've got two tools there key to bringing that question into focus. Same with the next row, offset, or economic threshold of offset versus digital. How to evaluate the type of work you have so you can evaluate if inkjet is an option. Well, think about this. Just by setting a stake in the ground or being able to segment the work on your offset presses that cost you more than producing it on an inkjet press, that's a pretty interesting organizing step. You can now say, all right, this is our target. Let's look inside of that. Your data is going to show you by customer, for example, or by product. And your press manufacturer is really going to be your key guidance on helping you with that question. But for you, having that cost threshold starts to simplify the approach to come up with an answer for that. Manufacturer, I'm just coming down the rows here. Manufacturer's press platform crossover points. Well, okay, it depends. Again, we're getting to everything, but try to simplify it. Obviously, you've got the qualification on your samples for that. You've got the duty cycle that could handle the volume of work. You've got those special met. Then you've got I'll call it the manufacturer's press platform cost per page. And when you compare that to your offset work, that's going to be, I'll call it your crossover point. New inkjet versus offset decision. Okay, same tool set. We're just taking them and we're applying them to your work, the future work you think you have in line for the next year, 2, 3, 5 years. And I think when we just keep coming down the line, ROI calculation, understanding payback, hopefully we have a more clear understanding of how these tools come together and do work for you. I did not omit understanding the inkjet value. This was one of them. Understanding inkjet value of the electrodes, electro-ink, electrophotographic, electrostatic. Clearly, contributors in this digital world. I'm not ignoring them. They have a little different dynamics from production, a throughput duty cycle standpoint. my focus here was on digital inkjet. So Matt, I'm pretty much open for business for questions.
Sorry, Paul, I had to reclaim the host to unmute myself, so apologize for that.
No problem.
Thank you so much. Folks, I'm going to keep everyone muted just so we don't have a bunch of people trying to talk over each other. So if you have questions, if you can use the chat feature here within Zoom, and I can moderate those questions via chat, that'll be the best way to move forward. But as people are typing those up, I just wanted to say thank you, Paul, for that insight, and I agree. I think that key point intelligence graph is always interesting to look at, and I'm interested to see hopefully if they can continue to do that study kind of on an annual basis to see how it continues to shift as the technology changes and people get more used to it, and seeing how just, I guess, the run lengths in general change will be quite interesting. But so if you have questions for Paul, please go ahead and hit me up in the chat. I'm guessing, Paul, if anybody has any questions they don't want to address here on the webinar, they can hit you up via email or text.
Yes, of course.
Awesome. Well, folks, I'm gonna do one last call for questions. And this time I'm gonna unmute everybody and break my own rule just in case. But oh wait, here we go. How were costs for inkjet heads calculated?
Question for your manufacturer. Generally, you have a lifespan for an inkjet head, and you're either going to replace it or refurbish it, depending upon the inkjet manufacturer. It's an hours measure. The life of the head is calculated in hours. In some cases, it's measured by how many liters flow through that head. So I would say it's absolutely a question that can't get a single answer. It's manufacturer dependent. Those would be the two general categories of measures for calculation: the life of that press or the life of that head, or how much ink has flowed through that head.
So I guess, Paul, maybe I think my guess is that question is more along the lines of, in your specific calculations where you put in a cost of an inkjet head, what were your assumptions in how do you?
Yeah. Oh, back on my slide. Yeah. So I was, for that one, looking for, and that was a running cost model. Let's see if I can flip back there. Inkjet head refurb. Okay, so the last item, and that's inkjet head change over time. So there is that moment of press being stopped, pulling out the defective inkjet module and replacing it. It's different for different press manufacturers. So I put that in there as a line item because it does impact the output that you'll get on that press during a period of time. So why not measure? You got refurb, you're either going to refurbish that head or replace it from a new module standpoint, but you also have press stoppage to change over that. Module.
That makes sense. So you're just saying, depending on what kind of press you have, as you develop your own running cost model, you're going to factor in all those various things based on the particular manufacturer's insights.
Question to ask, yeah. Ask your peers.
No,
look
that's
at
good.
The similar press in the market. Okay, what's it take you to keep your heads up to date?
Sure. Okay. Hopefully that answered the question. Anyone else? Why is capital cost included in the running cost model? More specifically, why only for Inkjet?
Yeah. Question comes up all the time when you're putting together a running cost model, and it could be asked this way as well. Why should I include capital cost in my offset press when it's paid for already? Well, clearly there's, that's fact. You don't have a payment anymore. For that one reason alone, I put the capital cost on Inkjet because it's a difference. And it's a big difference between the two presses. Measure it. It doesn't mean that when, and this is a running cost model is an isolated tool specifically for the purpose of getting as close to an apples to apples comparison of your presses. I think that putting the capital cost in the running cost for the offset, unless you're looking at two new presses, but keep in mind the strategy here, and the strategy impacts the way we compare the presses. Your strategy is, not that that's the assumption I'm making, is that you have an offset transfer strategy. So you have a 10-year-old or 15-year-old offset press paid for. You still charge your customer for that press, for the press time, because at some point you have to replace it, it's wearing out. But that's a different part of the accounting. That's a different part of your business model. The running cost model, I keep it out. If you really want to put it in there, be my guest. And the beautiful part of looking at a running cost model is that you can ask this exact question and you can look at, is capital in there for Inkjet? Is it in there for offset? It's out for offset. Okay, we agree with that. No problem. We're comfortable. But the key is that you have a framework that you would agree upon. So I don't insist that it be out. I think that it's an easier way to compare a press that's already paid for.
Right. And it's also going to be dependent on what kind of jobs you're getting, right? And your typical run lengths and why you'd be looking to adopt or add another press or change over. So that makes sense. All right. Well, thank you very much. And one last call for questions. Well, again, Paul, thank you for your time. Folks who joined us, thank you for your time. Again, there's Paul's contact information. We will post this recording online. Everyone will get an email about that. And if you're really hard up for more webinars, you check your email box because I get to be on another one tomorrow with Book Business Magazine, talking more about Inkjet. So check your email, see if that's something you're interested in. And with that being said, Paul, thanks again. Hope to see you and hope to see everybody on here soon. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Bye now.